Check. Hi, good morning, folks. Welcome back to day 5 or day 6 of Ignite, for those of you who count the pre-conference days. Can you sense the excitement? The excitement of a room full of folks who are finally ready to be released and set upon the world with all of the Ignite knowledge that we have, and finally getting, for some of us, back to see our families and our children. So, my name is Chris McNulty. I am a SharePoint Server MVP and Chief Technology Officer at CryptZone. I've been working in the SharePoint space for the better or worse part of the last 15 years, going all the way back to my days in Tahoe. My background and training is actually in corporate finance. My master's from BC is in investment management, but I've installed SharePoint by my own count something over 1,000 times over the course of my career. Most of my background is in delivering and consulting and running consulting organizations for large financial services firms and delivering in there. I joined the software world about 5 years ago, joining Quest Software, which then became part of Dell. And about a year and a half ago, I jumped to my buddy Kurt Muffelman. I went to Fairfield University 30 years ago with the guy who is now my CEO, and I'm working there with CryptZone. I am from Boston, Massachusetts. A little bit of local color, for those of you who are unfamiliar. We're champions in many things, including snowfall. So this is what my house looked like, close to peak snow. We hit about 111 inches for the season, which led to things like this giant snow mile, this snow mountain, which was at peak about 26 feet. When I left Milton, Massachusetts last Friday, this was still about 15 feet high. So I'm sure it's about 14 feet high by the time I get there tomorrow morning. I always think of, how many of you are old SPC hands, SharePoint Conference? Excellent, excellent. Tech Ed folks. Other, let's see, people have never been to either, because you're all at your first Ignite, so you're all from Other. So I always think about the last day of the conference. I always think about the Winter Olympics. And you folks are the hardy souls. If you ever pay close attention to the Winter Olympics, they're all orchestrated in exactly the same manner. Back when I was a kid, it was Jim McKay or someone else is, talking about, all the athletes are converging for the closing ceremonies and a party, and it's just good times. And meanwhile, the 30K biathlon is still going on. And those guys and girls are out there freezing and shooting, and everyone else is having a good time. You all are the troopers, so I appreciate your being here, and hopefully I'll give you some stuff that you can take home with and put to practical use. My demo environments had to be rebooted on my walk from my last session to here, and I see they're up and running, so I've cleared my throats for enough time. What are we going to talk about today? Well, first we'll talk about enterprise content management and how it maps to SharePoint's information architecture. Secondly, taxonomy services, in particular managed metadata, are the key glue to help us manage our content with efficiency and with accuracy. So we'll talk through what taxonomy is, how we build it, and how we attach it to content that lives in the SharePoint realm. Then we'll look at some very practical applications. First, cross-site publishing, introduced as part of SharePoint 2013 for on-premises, as well as what I call information catalogs, which is a different application of many of the same techniques that you can use universally between 2013 and the cloud. We'll look at, on a practical basis, what that means for information lifecycle management, how I apply, what tools are there for me, and look at a fully orchestrated process for managing content and bringing it into the appropriate retention policy based on the metadata that I put out there. And lastly, we'll look ahead to the cloud and to 2016 with what capabilities I can talk about today coming through Delve and the additional ways that I can classify and manage content as it comes together for SharePoint 2016 and beyond. A couple rules. This is Ignite. This is an IT session, so we're going to go deeply into the engineering. We're not going to be plunging into coded solutions. So if you were looking for me to crack Visual Studio, you'll have to wait for a different conference. It's always amusing when I try that. Enterprise content management is usually for more mature organizations that are looking for predictability. So that's not to say that there isn't value in the tagging and social classifications, whether you're using hashtags and related concepts, but we're looking mostly at formally managed taxonomies. A couple of things in the interest of time we're not going to be able to get into. we'll be using content types, but content type syndication, which is a powerful way to define a content type. And if you're using templates, make sure that documents are even being created with precision. I'd encourage you to look for more information on the topic on my blog or a number of other places that are out there. This is online. I know there's folks who are participating in the Yammer second screen, and if you post questions there, I'll try to pick them up after the session. We're in a very tight turnaround for this room, so I'm going to go as long as I can on this. At the end of the session, we'll move questions to the hall to clear the way for the next set of stage. That's the last bit of SharePoint presentation governance. I know that anytime the word SharePoint is said, governance needs to be said. So I have to have presentation governance as well. Christian Buckley, wherever you are, is smiling on me for remembering that. So as we look from how many of you are still, quote unquote, running SharePoint on premises in your organizations today? Thanks. Any of you not running SharePoint on premises, solely in the cloud? Some. Okay. So I wanted to share some information from my company. We published a survey earlier this week of several hundred enterprise users of Office 365 and related technologies. And there's a lot of stuff that's in the survey, and you can it's product neutral. You can follow this link and get more details on it. So we asked organizations, are you using Office 365 now or planning to immediately within the next year? The answer is up there. Take a look. And if you guessed 40%, you're correct. 40% of organizations, I'm sorry, I hit that. That is a presentation fail. 40% is not, I shouldn't correct myself, but I will fix that in the final deck. The actual answer is 63%. 63% of organizations are using it now or in the next year. Then we asked organizations that are you planning on running hybrid SharePoint? Part of your SharePoint on premises and part in the cloud, either indefinitely or permanently. And that answer was 76%. 76% of organizations have no plans whatsoever to ever move away from having at least some substantial presence of SharePoint in the environment. So as we look to the future, to 2016 and related technologies, we mentioned metadata before. Metadata from the Greek meaning after, literally after data. On practical basis, it's usually data that I use to classify other data. And for the purposes of many of today's demonstrations, we're going to be talking about how metadata is used to classify documents or information in a list. I don't think I need to ask most of you what SharePoint is, but just to make sure we set the proper vocabulary, SharePoint in 99% of all organizations gets deployed in something like this information architecture. And I know that there's social, I know there's search, I know there's workflow, I know there's custom application platforms that are out there, but this is the classic use case. An organization is setting up an intranet. They have at least one farm with a site collection that's tied to a content database. Each site collection can contain one or more subsites, grouped either by projects or by geographies or organizations. Each of these sites is a repository for things like lists, things like web parts, and obviously things like libraries. And a library is the place where I can attach one or more content types. The most common content type for files in SharePoint is one called document. But you can identify other ones. And a content type is a repository where I can say, these kinds of files should be using the same template. These kinds of files should have the same information lifecycle policy. And most importantly, and what we'll be working through today, saying that these content types should have certain bits of metadata that I always want to track about them. In this case, if we look at this, we can see that IT, legal, and HR all can use a policy content type. And time someone saves a policy, we're going to prompt them for data, for date, topic, and owner. But sales is too unpredictable, can't be tied down to policy, so we're not going to even bother giving them policies. An information architecture in most of our organizations proceeds according to this very simple pattern that I'm going to walk you through right now. Let's suppose we're starting a company today. Congratulations. And we're going to create a product, and our first product is going to be called the X21 Screen Cleaner. Part of my role at CryptZone is to think of new products. I didn't say good products, but new ones. This one's just a water bottle, as you'll see later on. And we have a good relationship with Microsoft, so we set up a SharePoint team site. We're one group. We have one product. Where I put information and classify it is irrelevant. There's really only one possibility. Information all goes there, simple storage, simple navigation. We get to be successful, though. We start working on some more products, and it's decided we need to bring marketing in to help us share the news about the wonderful discovery of water bottles. And the marketing person comes along, and they add a folder to the library. They're going to put their marketing information there, and still probably okay. I mean, folders, good, bad. I know that there's a lot of reasons not to use folders these days. There's only a handful of fantastic use cases. We won't go into that right now. But still, even if I have multiple products, finding and using the information, it's still relatively compact. Every organization, though, gets to this point eventually where marketing becomes its own department. And marketing says, I'd like to get my own site. And that marketing site moves over, and the documents move over there. In this case, the logical hierarchy of the site has become the de facto taxonomy. We've introduced a rule that says that information can belong to products or to marketing, but not both. It leads to a whole bunch of questions in most organizations that enterprise content management can help solve. When people will go out and they'll see that they're in marketing, they don't know where they're supposed to save their content. They're very tied to the idea it should be on a site, or do they put it in both places? And then someone comes along and they run a search and they see they find one information sheet, but they don't know if it's the most recent. Should they look somewhere else? Or in many organizations, they see two and then they create a third, and so on and so on. And finally, if you notice my first two examples, we talked about X-21 and X-21. Users are wonderfully messy and unpredictable. That's how innovation happens. But it also is very hard to manage content if I don't know how people are going to describe it. So the power of metadata is it gives me a way to manage the syntax of that classification. So I can have synonyms that say, if someone types in X21, I want you to steer them to the use of the X-21 term. So I'm not counting on the way someone spelled something in the full text of a document any longer. SharePoint and Office 365, in my opinion, are very much part and parcel of the big data movement. AIM estimates that the growth of unstructured data, aka files, in most organizations is somewhere in the order of 50 to 75% annually. During World War II, when they were doing some of the foundational research on long-range radio signaling for planes that were in the air, they started noticing static. And they very quickly realized that when you turn the volume up on a staticky radio, you're also turning up the static, signal-to-noise ratio. The challenge with the explosion of content is big data can also lead to a big noise problem because it becomes even harder than ever to find information. And I'm sure all of you have dealt with some level of that information sprawl and chaos in your organization. Metadata helps us improve the signal-to-noise ratio so we can, with precision, find and manage the content that we need to work with. We know that there are too many documents for us to be able to expect everyone to take great care in, by hand, moving and classifying information with great thought. There was a presentation 2 years ago at WPC where they said 5 years ago, the average information transaction, someone would go into their content on average 4 times a day, and they would spend something like 32 minutes on each interaction with a piece of content, thinking about the edits and so forth. In a mobile-first, cloud-first world, have you heard that phrase before this week? But in a mobile-first, cloud-first world, we've really moved to the opposite thing. People are touching their content on average something like 32 times a day for 4 minutes. And it's not as much time to think about the classification and the placement of the information and the security of the information. If you were in any of the sessions earlier this week on Infopedia and Next-Gen portals, we talked about this there as well. SharePoint and Office 365 are great at capturing lots and lots and lots of information, but organizing it and storing it take a little bit more care. And the reason for that is, let's suppose there's a couple of hundred things I want to do on my documents, and I have thousands and thousands and thousands of documents. When I layer in all of the possible permutations with tags and classifications, you're easily running into millions of possible interactions with a piece of content in the organization, and expecting someone to have the forethought to know on the fly what to do in each of those circumstances becomes a real challenge. In enterprise content management, I like to talk about sentence structure. So if you think of verbs as the things I want to do on the content, those are the content management actions we're going to talk about here shortly, as well as things like searching for content, using it, finding it. The documents themselves typically are the nouns that I'm acting on. And what allows us to have power are the adjectives. I'm old enough to remember Schoolhouse Rock. I'm not going to sing the song for you. But many organizations rely on manual data entry for this. And I like to talk about the cost of the red asterisk. Put your hand up if you know what the red asterisk is, right? It's a default. It's the indicator that says a field is mandatory. If you really want to have a storage management solution, add a lot of metadata fields to all of your libraries, mark them all as mandatory, and I guarantee you your storage will never grow out of control. Because users will look at that and they'll regard it as a tax, something they have to pay, pump information into in order to save their files, and they start looking elsewhere. OneDrive for Business would be great, but they'll go to Box, they'll go to Exchange, they'll go to Dropbox, all sources of unmanaged content. And getting that information there can be a bit of a challenge. Your choices can be through custom development, through setting default values in context. So I can set default metadata values based on a library, in some cases based on a folder. And then some of the other coding that's out there involves event receivers or workflow or things that are doing enrichment through the search engine, which came out of the FAST investments that Microsoft made several years ago. Taxonomy and folksonomy are two opposite approaches to classification. And I remember when I was at university, we put up a new building one year, and I noticed, because I was an RA, that they didn't actually put down any permanent sidewalks around it. Well, they put down temporary brickwork. And I was there a week early, so I asked the landscaper, how come there's no sidewalks? And he said, people are going to figure out their own paths over time. And if we put the sidewalk here and someone decides that the closest path is there, they're going to wear a path in the dirt anyway. Folksonomy is the idea of allowing people to start to classify their own things for their own purposes. And it is very valuable. But in terms of enterprise content management, you can't just expect users are going to go in and tag things willy-nilly and then be able to shape that 12 months, 18 months later into something coherent. Taxonomies, as I say, are built and not grown. Two tools I'm going to take a look at here shortly when we start defining taxonomy. One, the company Wand. They have a sold product called DataFacet, but one of the things that they provide there is a free taxonomy of business documents that you can download and import into your environment. Victor Willen, who's another SharePoint MVP, has a tool set he brought in that allows you to use Excel to model a taxonomy before we import it, and we're going to be taking a look at that in demo here momentarily. It's also important in terms of design for my taxonomy to think about facets. A very bad taxonomy is one where I'm trying to embed too many things and too many properties into each tag. So if I say red bike, blue car, red car, and then when I start to see, well, what if I have a bike that's two different colors, I have to add a new tag. And then if I have a car that's those colors, I have to think of all those permutations. Multifaceted design is reducing everything to its common elements. So I have a taxonomy for colors and a taxonomy for types of vehicles. That way, if I add, for example, a train to this example, I only need to add one tag, one place. I don't need to think of all the possible permutations and add them out there. Another set of tools that I encourage you to take a look at is the Dublin Core. So the DCMI initiative has defined a list of 15 elements which are believed to be essential to describe information, title all the way on through rights. Dublin Core is implemented inside SharePoint as a child of the document content type. So if you're creating a new document library, you can create it with the Dublin Core columns. I don't think all of the columns necessarily are needed. In many cases, in the same way, turning on a lot of asterisks for people, turning on too many fields can be wrong in some organizations. But if you were trying to jumpstart the creation of a taxonomy and classification system, the Dublin Core provides a way to look at things like who's the contributor, what are the rights for this. Many of the Dublin Core elements are anticipated in SharePoint. the illustration here on the right is showing you what Dublin Core looks like when you add it to a document library. There are a lot of text values. Do you need them all? No, but it is a good place to start if you're trying to figure out what are the standard things. Later on in today's deck, on my reference slide, I have a link to the DCMI Initiative online documentation where you can read about a novel's worth of information about each one of these fields that are out there. But that said, let's take a moment and jump over to my demo, which hopefully is still up and running. There's Nate and Rachel. Hi, kids. They can't actually hear me. Okay. So if we want to build a taxonomy, as I mentioned before, you can go directly into the Managed Metadata service and start pumping tags in through term store management. But in many cases, the tool set that may be a little bit more familiar to us is to take a look at that through Excel. Don't need to back up my environment now, but backup is important. I highly recommend backup. So if you download the link that I gave you here, you'll download basically a macro-enhanced Excel file. And when this comes up, we shall see it is thinking. Let me just check on my demo environment over here while we're waiting. Okay. So this is the Excel file. Let me blow this up a little bit for those of you with regular vision. And it's not terribly sexy, but you can see I define a name of a term set, the description I want to use, and a couple of columns, and I can go up to 7 levels deep. So if I want to come here and start adding things, let's suppose I haven't eaten breakfast, so you'll forgive me for having food on the mind. So let's say I want to also create another term set for flavor. And we're going to call this flavor. It's a category. There's nothing inside of it. So we're going to say the children of it are going to be so let's think of 3 flavors. I have all these shirts to give away, and there's not enough of you. So someone give me a flavor. Someone here. What'd you say? Vanilla. Great. They don't need to be ice cream. I'm sorry. I heard bacon over here. Who said bacon? Someone out there in the Twitterverse, please tell Mark Rackley that his spirit has been invoked. And a third one. I heard some kind of, was it blueberry or cake? Birthday cake. Okay. Works for me. Birthday cake. Vanilla, bacon, birthday cake. Do not combine them all, please. Okay. So we can come here and we can add additional terms and classifications, but essentially what this will allow me to do is create a file in the proper import format for me. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to save it out to my desktop. Then I can jump over here into a typical environment here. And I can go into site settings. Managed metadata runs on premises as a shared service application, and it is shared across multiple tenancies in Office 365. The advantage of that architecture is you don't have to be a full farm admin or a full tenant admin to be able to give people rights to go in and edit this if you have information architects in your organization. So when I move into term store management, here's my MMS. And I can come here and say, I want to import a term set. And it is working on it. Select the CSV. I'm going to take the file I just exported. And it's going to give me a couple of transient errors, but it's going to bring the term sets in. And there's my company enterprise taxonomy that I brought over, and I've got cost, I've got flavor. If I dig in further, I'll see bacon, birthday cake, and vanilla. Next, I can, if I choose to, come back here to a document library. And if I edit the settings of this library, I can add this new column I've just created because I want to be able to manage with precision. And so in this case, going into the library settings, that's just a matter of saying I want to add a new column. Waking up. Let's call this Flavor 2015. We say it's managed metadata. We say it's managed metadata. We say it's managed metadata. Gives me this trivial warning. It's reminding me that Office 2007 doesn't speak managed metadata. Any of you still run Office 2007? Okay, sorry. Not for you, no. You can still do it through the browser. It's just the edit screens that pop up in document information panels don't understand that. So I can come here, find the flavor, save this, and my column will all be set. If I chose to set a default value, I could set a default value here. If I have a different library and I want a different default value, I can set it there as well. So that's all available, good to go. And that's basically the fundamental process for how I start coloring my information. So 2013 has introduced a couple of concepts around cross-site collection publishing, what I call information catalogs. And we're going to walk through both of those scenarios here in some detail. The process of using cross-site publishing is around the idea of I want to take one master list, tie it to managed metadata, add properties to it. And when I'm tying it to managed metadata, I'm going to take a term set that I'm going to design from the get-go for navigation. I'll show you where that setting is. Once I've done that, the subscribing site collection can pick that up across the site collection boundary and use it as a basis for navigation, and feed whatever is coming from the primary list back into navigation to enhance that further with custom field displays and typically the content by search web part. I'm usually doing it with two different site collections. At the source, it begins with starting with the term set that I'm going to use for navigation. And I open it up to the target site collection. I've included the link here as a quick tip. By default, term set groups are not shared across site collections, but it's very easy on the home page, and I'll spotlight this for you when we're in demo, to just say what site collections are allowed to gain access to the place where it's mastered. Then we're going to create a custom list at the source. I'll show you the list at the source, link it out to a term set, publish it as a catalog. And then at the target, where we'll spend most of our time, I'm able to consume that in and show you what you get from a classification perspective. Cross-site publishing is inherently tied to search. If you are not crawling your environment on any regular basis, changes to the catalog are not going to be picked up until the next time. If you're running the memory-stingy process known as continuous crawl, that's a joke, folks. Continuous crawl is really an incremental crawl in many ways and shapes that runs every 15 minutes. If you want it to scan every minute, for example, this is the PowerShell that'll let you do that. Check in, check out, when you create catalogs, by default are turned on, which can be kind of wonky if you're making a lot of changes to the catalog source list. You need to then check them in and then make sure that those changes are getting picked up. So if you're making changes to a catalog list that are not being seen at the far end, that's typically the way that's come up. And they need to be crawled because they need to show up as crawled properties in the search index in order to make them available to the target navigation engine. An alternate approach, which can be done both on premises and in Office 365, is what I call the information catalog. In the information catalog, I'm not setting up a quote-unquote catalog list, but I am using a managed term set to feed terms into content by search web parts. It's a somewhat simpler implementation. We'll take some time walking through how to set those up as well. Some of the compare and contrast. Cross-site publishing is an on-premises only tool, but we've talked about what it is. The information catalog is a way that's anticipating some of the changes that we've known are coming into Office 365. If you're looking at Infopedia in particular, the idea that I want to create a browsable index that someone can navigate through of all the content, no matter where it lives in my organization, that's what the information catalog is. Let me show you at first what those things look like and then spend a little time going through with how they get constructed. So we can start from here. So this is an information catalog. And yeah, it's running. So if I navigate through this, oh, my apologies. It's really, really awesome, though, right now. That's an information catalog. Ta-da. So the information catalog gives me a way that I can define a way to browse through a navigation, what you see at the top half of the screen. And as I move through different parts of this here, you'll see I go to my screen cleaner. We've been busy people. There's some other products out there. There's the Y22. And it's showing me different documents. And as I hover over these, let me go back to X21. I want to point out a couple things there. I'm able to call up the information. Sorry, my demo's running a little slow. But I can see, here's something that someone mislabeled. We call it the X21 screen cleaner, but it's still showing up in this view. It's coming from the marketing area. This is coming from the products area. Essentially, I'm only looking at products and marketing, but where someone saves a document doesn't matter so long as I have a common way of defining it. That's the managed metadata we were talking about before. Conversely, if I want to look at the idea of cross-site publishing, cross-site publishing has a similar idea where I can define categories that are coming over from a master list and then be able to pull properties in based on what someone sees. In this case, the consumer environment is going to show me some properties that are embedded at the list process, and I can further enhance any of these sub-areas like pre-release because our mouse catcher is not really ready to be sold yet. She's just a kitten. I can further enhance those. Let's take a look at how those things are built behind the scenes. So first and foremost, cross-site publishing. Cross-site publishing begins with a site collection where I've defined a list that has been created using the product catalog template. There's an extensive list of scripts and articles that are on TechNet to walk you through this, and I have a link to those later on in today's deck as well. But here's the product catalog. And you can see I've added items here, item number, group number, some tags, and I've added some images there. Check-in, check-out is turned on here, so these are all approved items. If I want to look at the properties of this list, you can see this is set up as a catalog. It's got a custom column that's out there from a site column from managed metadata. I'll look at that momentarily. But I have a catalog setting. And in the catalog setting, I have to look at properties such as how do I want to dynamically generate URLs? How often is this environment being crawled? We can see that this was last crawled hourly. It's been enabled as a catalog. There's a link out to the advanced settings page in search because in case I change here and I want to make sure it gets picked up, I want to force a reindex. So this will take me to a link, not a deep dive in search, but it'll flag this entire list to be recrawled the next time that search fires off. and what fields do I want to use to build my URL, item number and group number, and then finally which column categorizes items for navigation. That's the MMS field I talked about before. And again, make sure the column's term set is global or connected site collections are given access to the term set. Let's look at where that's all set up from. So if I go into site settings here, I'll see term store management. Here inside term store management, you'll see I have my site collection grouping. And down here, I mentioned this earlier on this screen, I have a list of subscribing site collections that are allowed to see this site collection so long as they connect to the same managed metadata service. If they have a different MMS, they won't see this. Inside of this, I have a product hierarchy. Cancel. Try this one more time, folks. See if I can get right there to it. Oh, it thinks I'm making a change. This may take a few moments. Okay. Where I have said that this term set, most importantly, what I've said is not only is it available for tagging, but it's also available for navigation. I've tagged this one already and said, use this term set for site navigation. And then the pieces that live under here, consumer, education, industrial, they're all the things that I saw over here in this environment. This is the target site collection where I'm picking these things up. So the list is defined. I have pictures in for some, but not all of them. This is the subscribing site. The way that I manage that here, by going into site settings, on any subscribing site, and multiple sites can pick up information from the same cross-site publishing catalog. I can go down here and say Manage Catalog Connection. So I already showed you how this works, so we know this is working once. What I'm going to do, just stay on the edge of your seat. I'm going to blow away the catalog connection and recreate it, and hopefully everything will come up exactly the same way, but I'll show you what's involved in setting up the connection back out to that catalog. So I disconnect it. I'm going to reconnect it. Oh, so exciting. And it shows me, because it's been crawled, it has to have been crawled, and it has to have a list that's identified as a catalog list, and it has an MMS field in it that's identified for navigation. Here's what's out there. I have access to this from the subscribing site collection because I'm in Hurricane Portal. And when I say connect, it's going to ask me, do you want to integrate the catalog into my site? Yes. Which column am I categorizing for navigation? That's great. What's the root term? It's important to give it the root term. I tell it the root term is products. But typically I don't want to show that because otherwise my home page will give me just one menu item and everything will be a child of it. So by default, I usually keeping the root term turned off. I defined in the catalog how URLs should be formulated to get guaranteed unique URLs for each thing that comes out of this. I can create new category and master pages on the fly. I can pick a different master page if I want. We'll stay with what it has. Say OK. And when this finishes, I should be back to exactly where I was before. Behind the scenes, it is building pages and page layouts that conform to the connection that I just defined. Oh, and it's complaining because I didn't clean up the term set. So I'm not going to linger on that further. What I actually want to spend a little bit more time on, because it's also a little bit less complex, is the information catalog. So the information catalog can be used anytime I have a bunch of things here, the first thing to begin with is to remember that I have libraries, and we looked at one of these earlier, where I have a product area and a marketing area. If I go into the products library, I have a document library out there. Where I have put manage metadata fields here for product codes. And if I look at how MMS is defined in this case, I'll see that the term store is out there. And I've already defined a product hierarchy. I've said, here's the intended use. Use term set for site navigation. The most important thing to look at, not just that I've tagged it, but I have something called term-driven pages, where I'm saying anytime I'm using this for navigation, what I want you to do, if someone is using it in navigation, is I want to define a target page here. In this case, a page called details that lives in a library called product pages over in that information catalog site. And you can come here and you can browse and pick different pages. But the goal of this is being able to say, when someone clicks on this link, I want you to drive them to this particular page, this details page. That details page lives over here in the information catalog. What I've done on this site, inside the settings, so I come and say, I want to adjust the navigation. So rather than use structural navigation or global navigation, the third option is managed navigation, which pulls back from MMS. And with managed navigation, I say here that the current navigation should be represented using an MMS term set. And I identify products here. That's really all that I need to do for this process to make sure that navigation shows up for me. The most important thing is to make sure I'm gluing my classified content, MMS classified, with my navigation. And we do that in 2013 with the content by search web part. So if I go back and look at any of these pages here to open up details, this page is just constructed with a number of out-of-the-box web parts that I can use on-premises or in Office 365. And if I jump into edit mode, I'll show you how this page is constructed. The most important part here is the part that's called items matching a tag. That gets added the same way that I would add any web part to a page through the Add Web Part option. In the interest of time, I just want to show you the settings on the items matching a tag that matter. It's thinking. Okay. So this, most importantly, is items matching a tag is based on a search query. So I need to be able to go in and take a look at what the search query is. By default, these settings are not going to be correct for you. So what I want to do is come in here and tell it what I want you to do is I want you to show me things that come off of the search engine. We need to tell it the scope and how to filter the scope. So the most important thing here is, by default, I could say I want stuff from the current site collection. I can limit it to a site. I can limit it to URL. Or I could say don't restrict it at all. Anything that's in the search corpus can come up. In this case, I at least want to stay within the same site collection. But I could narrow it further. Then most importantly, instead of don't restrict by any tag, if I do that, I'm going to be typing in 742 documents and other items that come back into my pages, which is not what I want to do. That's imprecise. We're looking for precision. All I have to do is say, restrict by navigation term of current page. It's going to show me there's only 6 things that show, typically, that it's going to pump in there. Over time, as users change documents that live in those source libraries, once they're crawled, so long as they tag it with the appropriate product name, it doesn't matter where that content lives. Any library that lives anywhere in the site collection is all going to come here to one browsable thing that we call the information catalog. So all I have to do is just take this setting, restrict by navigation term, I'm good to go. You can do further things. You can change the layout, custom list with paging, using typical search display templates. I'm not great at them, but if you want one with 4 lines on right instead of 3, I'm your man. No, maybe I'm not. It doesn't like that one. And that's essentially it. That is the information catalog. Questions on that? Okay. 30 minutes to go. So we talked before about sentence structure and how historically the way that I manage content used to be constrained only to the content type. And over the past couple of editions of SharePoint, the addition and the power of metadata classification allow me to define one set of policies and rules for both finding and aging content over its life cycle without having to write completely separate policies for every possible permutation. In 2008, I worked with an organization that had 1,200 content types because they had 1,200 different retention policies, and there were different policies for, there's a content type for Bob's presentations in 2008, Bob's presentations in 2007, Bob's non-sales presentations in 2007. And we were brought in because, for some reason, users thought that having 1,200 content types in every library was a little confusing. The basic tool set for ECM includes things like content aggregation. This is going to be a survey of the in-the-box ECM tools before we put them all together to show you how this works. Some people had their phones up. I'll come back to this. Okay. It goes without saying, but I just want to reiterate, the classic functions, it's been around there forever in SharePoint, but versioning and approval are fundamental constructs in SharePoint, always have been, always will be there for how I approve and track the changes to content over time. One of the things that's been introduced more recently is the idea of rules-based routing, which is an essential ingredient if users can classify content but don't know where it really belongs, or if based on classifications I want to change where it belongs. It's typically using something called the drop-off library, where I can write rules. As people upload content, they're going to be reminded this is going to go somewhere else based on how you fill out the rest of this form. We'll take a look at that in demo as well. It's not like when I walk too far away from this thing. Enterprise records management is a related concept. ERM allows me to either declare something to be a record in place, based on the features that I have, or ship things to a quote-unquote record center. Older versions of SharePoint, most enterprises relied more on the ship it to a record center. Record in place, in my experience, is the more common thing that people do. What is a record? Is a pretty much open question. SharePoint has some default settings, but you're allowed to define what it means for something to be a record. It is a flag that is set in a document. By default, it typically means that the document is branded as undeletable, uneditable, and only a record manager can undo that classification, but you can reset that. Records can be managed separately from other content. So you might say, I want to keep presentations around for 3 years, unless they're records, and then use different rules to keep them around for 10 years, say. You can see the records management status by looking at the context menu, the ... ellipsis thing, by popping that up and seeing what the compliance details are for a file. It is record declaration by default is asymmetrical. Lots of people can go in and call things a record, but only a handful of people can undo that, because you wouldn't want official records to be necessarily that fungible. But you can change those behaviors. You can say that a record can just be flagged. You can say that records can still be edited. You can say that anyone who declares a record can undeclare it. That's entirely up to you, how you define that in the scope of your records implementation. Information lifecycle management is kind of the last piece of it. There is a rich no-code tool set that allows me to define behaviors for content types that can be reapplied or overridden at library or folder level and be enriched with metadata, so I can say they're usually time-based, but after a certain period of time, trigger a workflow, or mark something as final, or delete prior drafts, or move it somewhere else, or move something to a recycle bin, or purge it, all the kinds of things I might want to do over the life cycle of a document. This cheat sheet is there. I'll keep it up for a second, or if you download the deck, because the places I go to scope those features and to set them are highly variable. The content organizer is a feature that's turned on at the site level, and it's organized through site settings. Conversely, the way that I ship things to the record center is set up inside central admin. So this is just the cheat sheet for where I go to set up content organizer, e-discovery tool sets, records management, and the like. So I'm going to walk through a scenario here where we're going to take a piece of content. Presumably we've edited it. We're going to click a magic button. When we click the magic button, it's going to ship it to a content organizer who's going to look at the metadata, process it, and move it somewhere to put it under different retention policies based on that metadata. When I click it, the entire process will run in 3 seconds, or based on the speed of my demo environment, 30 seconds. But then I'll go back and show you how that's all structured and built. So let's take a look at document routing and retention policies. So let's come back to our marketing area. So here's our document library. And while that's going, let's just go take a file I want to work with, a very small file. Let's just rename it. We could edit this on the fly, but just for demo purposes, bear with me. Let's call this one Ignite 2015. Marketing site, we're going to upload this file from the desktop. Pretty standard. So when I upload it, I mentioned we do some things with content types. I have a custom content type that is attached to this library called spDemoDoc. spDemoDoc is a child of the regular document classification, but it allows me to specify, as I mentioned at the outset, to say anytime someone saves an spDemoDoc, I want to force them to put a couple of different fields in. And so when I say that this is an spDemoDoc, it's going to prompt me, most importantly, for a department. I can come here and I can start to type advertising. It's going to tell me that the preferred term for advertising these days is marketing. Silly. I don't obviously work in marketing, but a great respect for those who do. Some of my best friends are marketers. Save that document. And it's in there, it's typed, it's classified. What I'm going to do with this, sorry, that just dropped on me. I'm going to checkbox it here. And up over here in the top, I'm going to say send to. I'm going to send to a predefined destination called home drop-off. Sure you want to move this document to home drop-off. A link will be created to destination. Yes, I do. It's going to go off, sit and think about it. In theory, it's sending it to the drop-off library on the home page. And when this process is working on it, somewhere between 3 and 30 seconds later, it's going to come up and tell me that your document was moved and show me where it was moved to. Sent to the home drop-off location. But if I look at it, it's not in home drop-off location. It is in, super exciting, managed presentations. Why did it go somewhere else from where I thought I was shipping it? It's not going to the home page of my site. The next 5 minutes will helpfully shed light on that deep, deep, deep mystery. So the first most important thing, while I'm waiting for central admin to come up in the background, is if I want to find where that file went, I'm going to come and look at the home page of my site. And I'll see I have a folder out here called Managed Presentation. A library out here for Managed Presentations. if I look inside marketing, we'll see Ignite 2015, which I just shipped over there. It got there based on the classifications. I said it was a marketing document. How did that get there? Well, the first and most important thing that I did was I defined a send-to connection. A send-to connection can be invoked from the ribbon. And it's a custom location, and it asks me for a URL for a place where I have Content Organizer running. And I have Content Organizer running with rules on the home page of my site. SP 2013 demo, VTI bin, official file.asmx. For a shirt, lovely, only one of its kind, SharePoint shirt. What does VTI stand for? Put your hand up if you know it. Right there. Nope. VTI, what does it stand for? Yes. Sorry? Yeah, it's what it relates to, but VTI actually is an abbreviation for a company. I think Bonnie knows it, but I'm being a nudge. Vermeer Technologies Incorporated. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bonnie, what did Vermeer Technologies create originally? I'm sorry, Susan. I just brain dead up here. Susan, what did Vermeer create originally? A product called Front Page, which became part of the nucleus of SharePoint and then morphed into a lovely tool I like to call SharePoint Destroyer, otherwise known as SharePoint Designer. And I say, when I move something to the home page, what I want you to do is move it and leave a link. Because if someone was looking for that document in the original location, I want to give them a clue as to where it went. Cancel that change. Go back to the root of my site. The root of my site, which is... So now that I closed the setting, it needs to be, there's a check. Let me go back into it. Since you asked. So the question was, how do I know what that location is? I have already created a location, I'm going to get there in a second, where I have a content organizer running. And it reminds me over here a URL to a content organizer. The convention is whatever it is, wherever it's running, server/site URL, /VTI bin, /official file.asmx. And you can test here to click to make sure that there's one there. And it shows you, yes, that's a valid place. There is a content organizer that's listening if you ship the document. So if I come to the home page of the site, as I mentioned before, Manage Presentations, I'm going to look at my content organizer rules. My content organizer rules, down here, I don't want record declaration settings. You see, I have a rule that's defined for marketing and for other. So let's go take a look at that. I edit that item. Thinking. So the rule that I have here is yes, it's operating on a content type. And yes, it's operating an SP demo document. But it allows me to specify additional conditions. And I could say, I'm looking for files that have the word marketing in the name. But again, users are wonderfully messy and can't be trusted to put it in exactly the same way every time. So that's why I'm using a specific term. The demo department has to be equal to marketing. And I'm only concerned with files that end in PPTX. I only want to do this for presentations. And say, if you see this, go for Manage Presentations, Marketing. I can browse for a location. I optionally, if I expect a large number of things, and I really, really, really love folders, I can start making sure if I have a lot of things being processed here, move them to different folders. Here I say Manage Presentation. I'm going to send it to the marketing folder in that area. And I'll show you why I have a folder out there already. That rule's already set. The observant among you may notice I also have a rule that's out there for other types of documents with a different priority. Because I want to make sure that if it's marketing, I want to send it to one level of retention. If it's anything else, I want to set it somewhere else. So anything that meets the first test is going to process the priority 5 rules first. then look at 6. The numbers go from 1 through 9. And the other rule, just make sure that I have a department defined. It doesn't matter what the department is. If the marketing rule doesn't apply, the other rule will. And it puts it in the Manage Presentations library. And once it gets there, the rule around this about retention is driven not from the content type, but from the location. I'm having a end of the week moment. I'm sorry, you're right. I'm sorry, I'm in site settings. No wonder I'm not finding it. Thank you. I'm out of shirts. It's usually a good clue when I click on something, if I don't see a link that I've clicked on when I ran through my demos last night to show me what's there. So if I look at the information management policy settings, this will come up and will show me that for this library, at the folders level, change source or configure library schedule. And here I say I can navigate on the left-hand side what the folder hierarchy is and say that if something is in the marketing folder, what I want you to do is 5 years after it's created, move it to the recycle bin. If I wanted to edit that stage, I could say trigger a workflow that might send an alert to someone, hey, your document's going to be deleted in a week if you don't move them somewhere else. These are typically time-based. I can look at when it was created, modified, or declared a record based on days, months, or years, and be able to automatically say, I want you to recycle it, delete it, truncate versions, fix the next stage, all the things that I might want to manage in the life cycle, all of which I can set up behind the scenes, all of which get set and processed for me in that 3 to 30-second interval as soon as I invoke the original process of sending it in. So that's the whole information lifecycle automation, no-code solution, being able to use metadata to push that stuff in and forward. Ta-da. You're allowed to clap, people. Thank you. Okay, getting back to the final act here, talking through a little bit of the future. Not everything that's in 2016 is ready to be shown, but to talk a bit about what SharePoint 2016 is going to be able to consume from Office 365 with Delve, and in particular with Delve and boards. So if you think about boards, if you haven't seen it yet, it's not lit up yet in every possible Delve tenant that's out there for 365. It provides for me a way to categorize the cards of information that I'm seeing through my Delve client and be able to group them into related topics based on the classification that I set up. And I'll show you this in demo here momentarily. Moving forward, the Delve capability is going to be one of the hybrid workloads that you can bring from the cloud into the environment. If you take one message away about the future of SharePoint 2016 this week, it's this. It's not about pushing you into the cloud. It's about bringing the cloud to you to deal with on your own terms. Delve relies on machine learning. Lots and lots of cores doing machine learning to figure out relationships and things from the Office graph. And it would be really hard to scale that into a single server SharePoint farm. However, you can gain all the advantages of Microsoft processing by using the hybrid workload with Delve. The idea is that information in Delve is typically organized chronologically. You can get some information about what's most recent, but being able to put things together in a pattern that makes sense to you gives me a way directly from the Delve user interface to be able to light that stuff up for me directly. The Office graph is already telling me what is the relationship between people and their content through Office 365. Delve is consuming signals out of not just things like the video portal, but classic things. My OneSites, my OneDrives, my team sites, all of the interaction that I have. What are people contributing? What's going on around the organization? As long as I have rights to see a file, if there's a hot document that people that I usually interact with are working on, it can be surfaced for me through the graph. And then I'm able to take that and bring it up into a Delve board. So let me show you that quickly here in demo. Not get to closing thoughts. Okay. So here I am in my Office 365 tenancy. I go to the app launcher and jump over to Delve. You will see on my personal Delve board, since it is my personal tenancy, I talk to myself a lot. I create login accounts for my dog and my children and log in as if they were actually using the system. Unfortunately, my dog died last fall. Yeah, it is sad. But he's still, thanks to the power of Delve, a very active participant in many of my demos. Oh, Stan. So you can see him over there at the left. He was a good boy. He's 14 years old. So what I can do right here is be able to look at information by boards. And I can say, you can see some of the slides that I uploaded. I did a session on storage management with RBS earlier this morning. I uploaded that deck to my team site here. If I want to add that to a board, I can type in the name of the board I want to add it to. And lo and behold, it's there and available for me. Likewise, I did one of those silly videos. I encourage you to go to the site to download my travel log about going to Redmond 6 weeks ago to talk to Mark Cashman about Ignite. But that's here and available. It's related to Ignite. If I want to add it to a board, I can do that here. And then the board itself is available for me to show any information that showed in my feed that I thought was relevant. And other people can add things to that board, and so long as I have rights to see the content, it will show in that common board. And I can send a link for that. It is the same idea. Jump out before I pop up my personal email, which could always be surprising when you have several hundred people on the screen. I can link that to other people and provide a way for people to find a topic that's of interest to me. It is absolutely metadata. It is under some level of management. It is not using MMS, but it's the same concept. MMS is one implementation of content categorization that I have available to me. There are others. If you went to, as I mentioned earlier, if you went to the session on Infopedia, Microsoft will be lighting more of those up through 365 and 2016 over the year to come. But just a brief introduction, this capability, which today is living on Office 365, will be available in SharePoint 2016. The signals that are going to be generated to the Office graph, SharePoint 2016 will be able to provide those signals to a cloud-based graph to be consumed into a Delve board. So I'll be able to commingle my on-premises content alongside my cloud-based content and aggregate them into topics that are meaningful to me and to others, hopefully, through the use of boards. So a couple of closing thoughts here. So this is a picture of some of the high aspens out in New Mexico. It's really one of my favorites. Historically, there's been a wide gulf between on-premises and cloud-based implementations. And one of the things I think that I've seen this week very much is that over time, the branches of those two trees are growing ever closer together. And there are some things where I can work equally well in both environments. There are some workloads, we talked about this yesterday, there are some workloads that will remain perpetually best suited to on-premises SharePoint. There are other workloads that are built for the cloud, designed for the cloud, and shall remain there. And so the question is, as you are in your roles as provider of IT service to your clientele, to your customers, to your users, to your information workers, to your whatever we're calling them by the time we get to Ignite next year, making sure that you've got the best mix. This session is about concepts in ECM and taxonomy and classification. If you are trying to get that sophisticated classification, it's important to it's important to think about what kind of classification. Some general rules. You need to be honest. Take a searching and fearless inventory of what kind of company you truly are. And if what you are looking for is organization, predictability, and control, Those are typically hallmarks of a managed taxonomy of some sort. If you were social adopters, dynamic, speed is more important than precision, you'll get the precision later. That's another fine way of organizing your company. You are probably more likely to be in the folksonomy camp, end-user tagging, less concerned about that kind of sophisticated classification. On-premises environments, because of the availability of MMS there, tend to be organized around taxonomy services principally. Cloud environments, you do have managed metadata available in Office 365, but cloud-only environments can be more folksonomy friendly. These are not hard and fast rules, these are guidance, but if you were looking for true enterprise content management, taxonomy is going to give you the precision you need to do that as you move forward. So that said, this tells me, even though I'm the highway to the danger zone, it's a yellow light here, that we're just about wrapped up. I have the gift of being of Irish ancestry, which means I will talk forever, so I need red lights and sunsets to remind me to shut up and go home. I hope this has been a useful session for you. As promised, some links that may be helpful. More information about the Dublin Core is available at dublincore.org. Free taxonomies, as well as ones you can purchase, are available from Wand. Wiktor's add-in for Excel is also linked there. And a full library of scripts and things you can use to empower cross-site publishing is available on TechNet at the link that's out there as well. And for even more information, I can't recommend that you come to my book signing on Monday night at the expo floor anymore because it's not going to happen. It's already done. So if you got a copy, great. If you didn't, a link to the latest version of my 2013 book is available there. It's free of charge. It's an electronic copy. There's no registration. I won't even send you a holiday card. You just click it, download it, read it, send me complaints about the pricing, and it was free, so I will probably disagree with you about the value provided there. But additional ways to contact me are available there. That said, you've been a wonderful audience. I'll be moving to the back for Q&A. Thank you.